Welcome back to The Practical Woodsman. I'm Rut, the creator and host of The Practical Woodsman. That's right, it's my genius which has brought this all into existence, and today we're going to be talking about the greatest, sorta okay, not too shabby, survival movies. Before we get into this list, we got to do the musical introduction, so let's get that out of the way. So, movies. Movies never quite get it right, do they? When it comes to the true nature of being out surviving in any environment. I'll give you an example. I was watching the other night this movie called East of the Mountains, starring Tom Skerritt. He's an older man, goes out into this desert-like area, just himself and his dog. He takes a shotgun with him. And as he's going out into this desert wilderness, he's carrying one canteen, one of those round old cowboy canteens, and that's all the water he's got. It's not any more water than this right here. And of course, in the movie, it lasts him like 3 days. That's even the water he has to share with his dog in the movie. Anybody who has any experience with these sorts of things whatsoever knows that that is not the true nature of going out into any area, let alone a desert area. The weight of water you're going to have to carry with you is just staggering. I mean, the heaviest thing in your pack is anything that's in liquid form. And so going out into a desert area where, the possibility of finding water is very low. It's not like you're going to be stumbling over springs and streams and creeks and all that stuff. You'd be carrying gallons of water with you. Not this much water that you also have to share with your dog. And by the way, this much water, even in a green, lush forest, in the summertime or the wintertime, will last you maybe 2 hours because you're doing that physical work of hiking and moving through the woods. You go through your water really, really quick. So the idea that something like this could last Tom Skerritt in a desert-type area, like 3 days between him and his dog, is ridiculous. All of these movies have flaws when it comes to perfectly representing the true nature of what it's like being out in the woods or being in any true survival situation. That's why I call this list the greatest sorta okay, not too shabby, survival movies. The 6 categories: wilderness survival, my personal favorite; extreme mountain, extreme cold survival. This is like not just being up in like the eastern mountains. This would be like being on the top of the Swiss Alps, top of Mount Everest, those sorts of things. Really extreme conditions. Number 3, end of the world, post-apocalyptic survival. Number 4, on the run, on the road, traveling survival. Number 5, ocean or tropic survival. And number 6, war, social unrest, natural disasters, urban survival. And so I've got a list of movies for each one of these categories. So we're going to start with number 6, war, social unrest, natural disasters, urban survival. I should say that in this creating this list of survival movies, I wasn't just looking for movies that had value as far as teaching you specifics of what to do in the woods or teaching you some specific survival technique or anything like that, but there is just as much value in a movie reflecting the true nature of certain conditions or situations that we as people might find ourselves in. So keep that in mind as we do these movies. I've got some science fiction movies on here too, of course. Probably not going to run across the alien anytime soon, but there are aspects to some of those movies that offer insights into what it might really be like in certain situations. And knowing how things might be like in certain situations go a long way in helping you mentally prepare and even physically prepare. Bug out bags, the idea of what you can carry, what you can't carry. For example, going back to that East of the Mountains movie with Tom Skerritt, watching that and knowing that one canteen is absolutely absurd and ridiculous is worth your time, isn't it? Because then if you're going to go into an area like that, it's nice to know that one canteen ain't going to cut it. If you're going to go out and visit Grand Canyon, one bottle of water is not going to cut it. A lot of people die down in Grand Canyon all the time from simple dehydration and overheating. The certain insights that movies offer that give you a true sense of what it might be like in certain circumstances is just as valuable as these movies where, they're showing you how to make a fort out of a tree and stuff like that. So back to this war, social unrest, natural disasters, urban survival. Let's start with Saving Private Ryan, which is number 6 on my list. A lot of you are familiar with this movie already. A mission to find and bring home Private James Francis Ryan after the death of his brothers. The mission takes them through Nazi-occupied territory. This exciting war thriller brings the reality of history's bloodiest war into the homes of ordinary people, but also brings to light the reality of broken and lost families in a time of total and encompassing war. I saw this movie in the theater, and it scared me. I felt like I was right there on the Omaha beach, and my grandfather was actually there in real life, fought at the Battle of Normandy. It gave me a sense of being right there and the fear of just even moving an inch. That's how much danger was in the air. A lot of the information focused on the Omaha beach scene, which is the storming of the beach. It happens right at the beginning of the movie. What I was mostly interested in was other features of the movie that represented the true nature of life in those circumstances. So for example, after the opening part of the movie where they storm the beaches of Normandy, they then are walking through these small villages and stuff. They're walking across countryside, they're walking through small villages, and there's certain inherent dangers to that. All of that I found great value in. It gave me a real sense of what that might be like in a wartime situation or a social unrest situation where you're probably going to want to avoid main roads and stuff like that and cut through countryside, through woods. But then you're going to find yourself in these areas of small towns and things like that, and what might that be like? So visually, that was very valuable to me in Saving Private Ryan from 1998. And I remember this from the time when this was in theaters. The Department of Veterans Affairs had actually set up a special 800 number to help former soldiers who might be traumatized after seeing the film. I'll tell you, my grandpa, who I was talking about earlier, who had fought at the Battle of Normandy, during the 4th of July, whenever there were festivities going on around, it was known by all of us kids not to be setting firecrackers off anywhere around his house. You can set the firecrackers off in the field and over here and over there, but nowhere near Paul's house. If you're seeing Saving Private Ryan for the first time today, after you've been desensitized for the past 20 years, it might not be as impressive to you. But at the time, no movie had ever come out that was like that. Number 5, 3 Days of the Condor from 1975, starring Robert Redford and Faye Dunaway. The plot is a bookish CIA researcher in Manhattan finds all his coworkers dead, and he must outwit those responsible until he figures out who he can really trust. I love this movie. It takes place entirely in an urban setting, deep in the city. Skyscrapers, buildings, downtown streets, and all sorts of things like that. So, I lived in Philadelphia for a long time. It's an entirely different world. Type of survival instinct needed in that kind of setting is entirely different than if you're up in the woods and hills and hollers and mountains. Even though a lot of folks might not think of it as a survival movie, Robert Redford has to display this kind of cleverness and resourcefulness. It offers a lot of insight, I think, into if you were to find yourself in situations like that, with confusion swirling all around you, how you might maneuver yourself around that type of a setting. It's the only feature film to be filmed inside the World Trade Center. In actuality, the CIA did maintain a large undercover station at 7 World Trade Center, which was publicly revealed 2 months after the 9/11 terrorist attack. The station was disguised behind the false front of another government organization and served as the New York City base for spying on and recruiting foreign diplomats serving at nearby United Nations building. The movie was shot on location in New York during the fall of 1974. 3 Days of the Condor, great movie. Number 4, 12 Years a Slave from 2013. By the way, it's based on a true story of a real historic figure. This person has to display wisdom, cleverness. He's got to be strategic, endure. He's got to bide his time. All of these things that, we get into this mindset, I think, of that could never happen to me. Slavery is so long gone and stuff like that. But like the Boy Scouts say, be prepared Truly being prepared involves imagining a situation and imagining how the best way to deal with that situation might be. Therefore, when you find yourself in similar situations, you're not coming up with solutions from scratch. Maybe you're not worried about becoming a slave. Does that mean that the possibility that you will never be pursued or imprisoned or held hostage or anything like that, that's a complete impossibility? Of course it's not a complete impossibility. 12 Years a Slave, 2013. It's a difficult watch, but I think it's an important watch. It's based on an incredible true story of one man's fight for survival and freedom in the pre-Civil War United States. Solomon Northup, a black man from upstate New York, is abducted and sold into slavery. Here's some trivia. The tree where Solomon sees several men being lynched in the movie was actually used for lynching, and it's surrounded by the graves of murdered slaves. Solomon Northup, the real man that the movie's based on, unfortunately disappeared 4 years after he was freed. To this day, historians don't know what happened to him. Like I say, it's a difficult watch, but I think watching things like that are important to give you an idea of just what people are capable of doing to other people. So that gives you an edge up in life, right? That you're not naive about the world, but also gives you a chance to imagine yourself in that situation. How would you handle that? Would you handle it like he handled it? Would you do some things different? Number 3 is Dr. Zhivago, 1965. One of my favorite actors, Omar Sharif. Definitely one of my favorite directors of all time, David Lean. He directed 2 of my other favorite movies of all time, Lawrence of Arabia and Bridge on the River Kwai. Fantastic director. Dr. Zhivago, 1965. The plot is set just before and in the years following the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. The movie follows the life of Dr. Yuri Zhivago, Omar Sharif, as he marries, raises a family, has his life totally disrupted by World War I and then by the revolution. Shown against the epic of a world turned on its head, his life and freedom are torn from him as the new society makes demands. Again, the value of this movie is seeing the social unrest and imagining yourself there. Not so much the value in the choices he makes, but in seeing that reality illustrated and having an opportunity to imagine yourself in those conditions. The movie wasn't shown in Russia until 1994, freezing, by the way. It's cold throughout much of the movie, and so, a lot of the movie involves trying to stay warm, trying to keep fires going. What do you burn? The answer is you burn whatever you can find to burn. It's the 8th highest grossing film of all time, or it was, as of 2010. Number 2, really great movie, Babel, from 2006, starring Brad Pitt, Cate Blanchett, Gael Garcia Bernal. The story bounces different parts of the world. It's called Babel because, of course, that was the tower where God confused all the languages of mankind to disperse them throughout the world instead of having them all congregate in one place on the earth and build a tower to their own glory. In the movie Babel, there are difficulties that arise. There's emergencies that arise and difficulties in communicating with people when you're outside your own country, you're outside your own culture, you're outside your own language, you're immersed somewhere in a culture or an area of the world that you're not super familiar with, and you're trying to get by and survive this emergency. Found the movie really realistic in its depiction of that. And again, the value, I think, is in imagining yourself there. How would I handle that? What would I do? You can imagine the stresses upon you and the limitations of time, the constraints of being able to move and communicate, and how those would affect you trying to get about in this foreign environment. And number 1 on my list of war, social unrest, natural disasters, urban survival list is The Grapes of Wrath from 1940. Plot: the story of the Joad families told. They, poor Oklahoma sharecroppers, who, like all others in their situation, are pushed off their land by wealthy landowners during the Great Depression. And as a result, they, like many others in their situation, make the decision for the dozen or so family members, with another one on the way, to migrate to what is seen as the land of opportunity, California, where jobs as fruit pickers are purported to be plentiful. And they have different challenges surviving during this Great Depression, looking for work, traveling across the United States, and dealing with the natural disaster, which was just a really the Dust Bowl. Worth checking out. Grapes of Wrath, 1940, beautiful, still relevant today. Next up on our list of different types of survival movies is ocean, tropic, jungle survival. Let's start with jungle, number 5 on the list. Jungle, 2017, stars Daniel Radcliffe. You know who he is. He's the Harry Potter guy. Has to face a grueling struggle for survival in the wilderness, which brings him closer to a loss of reality. Kevin's rescued by locals and persuades a ferryman to embark on an uncertain search for his lost friend. It's based on a true story. The condition that causes his feet trouble is called trench foot. It's a serious condition caused by feet being too wet for too long, which can cause skin and tissue breakdown, increase in the risk of infection. World War I, 75,000 British soldiers and 2,000 American soldiers died as a result of trench foot. And you know, backpackers and wilderness wanderers are not immune to that. That's why I say never skimp on your spare socks. Number 4 on this list, Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, stars Russell Crowe. Doesn't really involve a lot of survival stuff. It's more of a war movie, but I love seeing the depiction of ships, like old-timey ships, and the real conditions that people would have had to endure while up on these ships, and at the same time dealing with enemy combatants and the weather and the sea and all these things. So it's a really beautiful movie. Number 3 on my list is another movie everybody knows about. That's Cast Away, starring Tom Hanks. The plot is that he's a FedEx guy. He's flying from one country to another, troubleshooting issues at FedEx, and the plane crashes, and he gets stranded on an island by himself. Everybody remembers Wilson, the volleyball that he becomes best friends with. Tom Hanks said he first got the idea for the film after reading an article about FedEx. He says, "I realized that Boeing 747s, filled with packages, fly across the Pacific 3 times a day. What happens if one of those goes down?" he said. So he took that idea and combined it with his new interest in how to survive without the 5 required elements for living: food, water, shelter, fire, and companionship. And voila, you get the movie Cast Away. Number 2, grossly underappreciated movie called All Is Lost from 2013, starring Robert Redford. Love this movie. I love it. It was going to be number 1 on this list until I remembered The African Queen. All Is Lost, Robert Redford. Deep into a solo voyage on the Indian Ocean, an unnamed man, Redford, wakes to find his 39-foot yacht taken on water after a collision with a shipping container. With his navigation equipment and radio disabled, the man sails unknowingly into the path of a violent storm. Despite his success in patching the breached hull, his mariner's intuition, and a strength that belies his age, the man barely survives the tempest. Using only a sextant and nautical maps to chart his progress, he's forced to rely on ocean currents to carry him into a shipping lane in hopes of hailing a passing vessel. With the sun unrelenting, sharks circling, and his meager supplies dwindling, the ever-resourceful sailor soon finds himself staring his mortality in the face. Love this movie. Again, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. There's hardly any speaking in the movie. It's just Robert Redford alone on a boat, proactively trying to address each thing that pops up. I can so identify with that. You know, you're out in the woods by yourself. Nature decides, right? So whatever nature throws at you, it kind of determines the next steps that you've got to do. And I was out on this trip out in the mountains, 5 feet of snow and freezing rain. Started freezing raining that night, and I was just stretched so thin. I caught myself thinking, if only I had somebody here, an extra set of hands who could help carry some of this load. So All Is Lost from 2013 with Robert Redford really reminded me of that. He's all by himself on this boat, dealing with the ocean, and just dealing with one thing after another. The director adhered to what he termed his bungee cord rule. The camera couldn't be any further away from Robert Redford than like a bungee cord. Robert Redford was frustrated that the studio didn't promote the film for awards. Film critics were surprised that it was given such a small release with little publicity, and it actually contributed to Robert Redford eventually retiring from acting altogether. Next up, an ocean tropic jungle survival The African Queen from 1951, starring Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn. The plot: in World War I, East Africa, a gin-swilling Canadian riverboat captain is persuaded by a straight-laced English missionary to undertake a trip up a treacherous river and use his boat to attack a German gunship. One of the best survival movies ever made. Bogey playing against his normal type. Realities on this river, leeches and bogs and obstacles, the boat engine not wanting to cooperate, and weather. Just a fantastic movie, particularly for its time. Sources claim that everyone in the cast and crew got sick except Humphrey Bogart and John Huston, who said they avoided illness by essentially living on imported Scotch whiskey. Bogart later said, "All I ate was baked beans, canned asparagus, and Scotch whiskey. Whenever a fly bit Houston or me, it dropped dead." Humphrey Bogart won the Academy Award for Best Actor for his performance in this movie, making him the last man born in the 19th century to ever win a leading role Oscar. To show her disgust with the amount of alcohol that John Huston and Humphrey Bogart consumed during filming, Katharine Hepburn drank only water. Guess what? As a result, she suffered a severe bout of dysentery. So that's number one on my list of ocean, tropic, jungle survival. The African Queen, 1951. Next up in our categories is on the run, on the road, traveling survival. And let's start with The Fugitive, movie probably everybody's seen, starring Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones. Plot: Dr. Richard Kimball, unjustly accused of murdering his wife, must find the real killer while being the target of a nationwide manhunt. Now, this is another one of those movies where just watching how Richard Kimball or Harrison Ford dealt with the realities of being pursued by U.S. Marshals through the city, how he got fake ID, how he secured himself lodging, got cars, traveled, stayed incognito, and things like this were really insightful. You catch yourself thinking, would that work? How would I handle myself in that situation? Now there's a few outlandish things like him jumping off this sewer spout ridiculously high would have killed him. So I'm not suggesting that I gained any insights from that. But there are a lot of small things, subtle things in the movie. The river was so cold that the crew kept tubs of hot water off camera to keep Harrison Ford warm. Weather so cold that when the crew filmed some of the scenes, Tommy Lee Jones recalled that the batteries on the camera kept freezing. Next up, number 5, Bad Company from 1972, starring Jeff Bridges. Here's the plot. A God-fearing Ohio boy, dodging the Civil War draft, arrives in St. Joseph, Missouri, where he joins up with a hardscrabble group of like runaways heading west. They find that life as desperados in the West is more serious than they understood when they embark on abortive careers in bushwhacking. Good movie. Jeff Bridges, just a young pup in that movie. Number 4, The Journey of Natty Gann. It was popular back when I was in grade school. Meredith Salinger, John Cusack. Natty Gann is a 12-year-old Depression-era girl whose single father leaves her behind in Chicago while he goes to Washington State to look for work in the timber industry. Natty runs away from the guardian she was left with to follow Dad. She befriends and is befriended by a wolf that has been abused in dogfights. She hops a freight train west. Natty has a series of adventures and misadventures in various farmhouses, police stations, hobo camps, reform schools, and box cars. Some trivia for you. Natty Gann's wolf dog, Jed, also appeared in another movie that appears on my lists here, we're about to talk about in a little bit. The Thing, 1982, and White Fang, 1991. Many movie posters for the film featured a long blurb that read, "Her name is Natty Gann. 2,000 miles of danger separate her from her father. Only love, hope, and courage can help her find him." Wonder how many of you out there saw The Journey of Natty Gann back when you were younger, and if it left an impression on you. Let me know in the comments or on our group over on Locals, The Practical Woodsman. .locals.com, or you can download the locals.com app from the App Store and just search for The Practical Woodsman. Number 3 on my list of travel survival, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? That's right, the 2000 film by the Coen brothers, starring George Clooney, John Turturro, and Tim Blake Nelson. A lot of people already know this, but it was loosely based on Homer's Odyssey. sprung from a chain gang and trying to reach Everett's home to recover the buried loot of a bank heist, Ulysses Everett McGill and his buddies are confronted by a series of strange characters: sirens, a cyclops, bank robber, a campaigning governor and his opponent, KKK lynch mob, and a blind prophet. George Clooney was born in Kentucky. He didn't immediately understand the character, so he sent the script to his uncle Jack, a tobacco farmer in Kentucky, and asked him to read the entire script into a tape recorder. Unknown to Clooney, in his recording, Jack, a devout Baptist, omitted all instances of the word damn and hell from the script, which only became known to Clooney after the directors pointed this out to him in the middle of shooting. Neither one of the Coen brothers had ever read the Odyssey. They just knew about it by osmosis, just what they have absorbed from popular culture. But, Old Brother, Where Art Thou, one of the movies that most perfectly reflects my personal background in culture in ways that it's very rare for a movie. They're traveling through towns, they're dropping in on family, they're sleeping in barns, they're sleeping in the woods, they're eating gophers and other critters and stuff like that, and presented in a comical way. But there's a lot of truth to it too. If you could think about being in an actual survival situation, you would eat whatever you can get your hands on. A gopher would be like a 5-star meal if you've been living on grasshoppers and stuff like that. I mean, having a whole gopher to cook over the fire would be like living in paradise. So there are a lot of really great survival type things scattered throughout the movie Old Brother, Where Art Thou? Number 2 on my list for traveling survival: Three Godfathers from 1948. It's a John Wayne movie. The plot is, after robbing a local bank, 3 men do their best to evade the local marshal and his posse. In the wilderness, they find an abandoned wagon and a woman who has just given birth. She's dying, and she asks these 3 men to take care of her newborn child. And so the 3 men, these 3 cowboys, out in the middle of the desert, decide to do their best by the newborn and set off across the desert to deliver it to safety. Not all will survive, and those who do, jail likely awaits them. John Wayne was badly sunburned while filming the movie and briefly hospitalized. It does a really good job of depicting just the brutal nature of the desert. Them trying to find water, being certain where water is and getting there and there not being any. I mean, you really get a sense of their desperation and disappointment in scenes like that. And you imagine yourself in that situation. Good gracious, would I be able to keep going given all these things? Number 1 on my list of on the run, on the road, traveling survival is Lonely Are the Brave from 1962, starring Kirk Douglas, Walter Matthau, a Roman cowboy whose fierce individualism is at odds with contemporary urban values, emerges from the mountains when he learns that his friend Paul Bondi has been jailed for helping illegal immigrants cross the border into the United States. Deliberately jeopardizing his own freedom to join his old pal behind bars, Burns is greeted by a virtual stranger. Bondi's tame spirit and conventional outlook force Burns to address the very real mortality of his old-fashioned idealism. Burns makes a break for the border on his beloved horse Whiskey, determined to preserve his chosen lifestyle. It's such a fascinating movie because it's a Western, but it's when the Old West was being modernized. So there's highways in it, there's modern law enforcement and helicopters and things like that, and you really get to see Kirk Douglas, his character, struggling with a changing world. This world where everything was open. There's one part in the movie where he's riding along on his horse on this open prairie, and he comes to a fence, a barbed wire fence, and he just pulls out some pliers and snips the barbed wire fence like it's not even there and just keeps going. Of course, that's somebody's private property. But if you think about it, when he was a cowboy back in his 20s or, riding with his dad or his grandpa, the whole world was there probably wasn't fences. Everybody probably did have complete access just to the ride out and not worry about whether you were on somebody's property or not. It was all open and untamed. And also, trying to escape with a horse against people with like modern cars and stuff like that through the wilderness. Lonely Are the Brave, 1962. So let's go to the next category, which is End of the World, Post-Apocalyptic Survival. Number 8 on my list is The Last Man on Earth from 1964 and stars Vincent Price And number 7 on my list is Omega Man, 1971, starring Charlton Heston. The reason why I read those two together is because they're based on the same source material. The source material was I Am Legend by Richard Matheson, one of my favorite books of all time, ruined by the Will Smith stupid Hollywood movie version, which is just so daggum stupid. Ruins the source material. But The Last Man on Earth, probably the movie that holds up best to the source material. But it's about a man who's the last man on Earth that he knows of. And just seeing how he lives, how he deals with loneliness and solitude and things like that when the whole world is gone. But all the institutions, like all the buildings and everything still exist. And he's just been alive by himself for years. It's really interesting. It really gets you thinking, what would I do in that situation? And Omega Man with Charlton Heston from 1971, basically it's the same story. Number 6 on my list is Monsters from 2010. Probably a movie that not a whole lot of people have seen. It's a post-apocalyptic kind of end-of-the-world type thing. I can't remember if he's a journalist or what he is, but he's traveling with a girl, and they're traveling through jungles and down rivers and everything, and the political landscape is different because of these giant creatures that have been on the earth and that people are avoiding and those sorts of things. Number 5 on my list is Soylent Green from 1973. That's a Charlton Heston movie, Soylent Green. Number 4 on my list of end-of-the-world post-apocalyptic survival is 1984. It was released in 1984, starring John Hurt, Richard Burton. In a totalitarian future society, a man whose daily work is rewriting history tries to rebel by falling in love. Marvin Rosenblum once said that this movie had the greatest marketing hook that has ever existed for a movie. A film of 1984 made in 1984. The director once said of the movie, "There are attitudes of doublethink all around us." George Orwell pointed it out in a very extreme form. He was writing when the world had just experienced an upheaval from the right, which was Nazism. But since then we have an upheaval from the left, Soviet communism. And now we can see both sides of it. So it deals with all this totalitarianism and post-apocalyptic type of thing. There's thought police. Many of you are probably familiar with the source material, the book. If you haven't seen the movie, it's worth seeing. It's so gloomy and depressing, to be honest with you. But it reveals realities about directions the world could go in very easily. The tortures in the film are inspired by real torture techniques that the Soviet Union used. Number 3 on my list of post-apocalyptic or end-of-the-world type survival, War of the Worlds. Both the 1953 movie and the 2005 movie. We're going to talk mostly about the 2005 movie here, starring Tom Cruise, directed by Steven Spielberg. The plot is an alien invasion threatens the future of humanity. The catastrophic nightmare is depicted through the eyes of one American family fighting for survival. What was most interesting to me about this movie was seeing the panic of people and just one family trying to maneuver through all this panic and just hordes of people out in the streets and traveling on foot and by car. And the main character, Ray, played by Tom Cruise, takes these back roads at one point, and this military caravan comes through on a real back road out in the middle of nowhere. You got to remember that the world had just experienced the 9/11 attacks just a few years before, and so there were a lot of parallels. It really explored the fears of people at that time, and a lot of that is reflected in the movie. Taking refuge in basements, like I said, traveling back roads to try to get different places, trying to make contact with family with no cell phone reception, no phone reception at all. Apart from just being a real good science fiction movie, there's just a lot of value in that movie. Would I move during the day? Would I move during night? Where would I sleep? Would I sleep in a basement? Would I sleep in the woods? Like, what's the right thing to do? Number 2 on my list is Children of Men, 2006, starring Julianne Moore, Clive Owen. It's set in 2027, when no child has been born for 18 years, and science is at a loss to explain the reason. African and East European societies collapse, and their dwindling populations migrate to England and other wealthy nations. In a climate of nationalistic violence, London peace activist turned bureaucrat Theo Farron joins forces with his revolutionary ex-wife Julian in order to save mankind by protecting a woman who has mysteriously become pregnant. The movie envisages a world one generation from now that has fallen into chaos on the heels of an infertility defect in the population. The world's youngest citizen has just died at age 18, and humankind is facing the likelihood of its own extinction. Again, I think the real benefit of this movie is imagining the collapse of societies and just trying to figure out how would you maneuver that. Number 1, The Road from 2009, starring Viggo Mortensen, based on a Cormac McCarthy novel. I've read the novel, and the movie is so close to the novel. Takes place in a post-apocalyptic world several years after whatever caused the cataclysmic event. They never do describe what caused the cataclysmic event, which in turn has caused frequent quakes as further potential hazards. The world is gray and getting quickly grayer as more and more things die off. A man and his preteen son, who was born after the apocalypse, are currently on the road. They're planning to walk to the coast and head south, where the man hopes there will be a more hospitable environment in which to live. The man has taught his son that they are good people who have fire in their hearts, which in combination largely means that they will not resort to cannibalism to survive. The man owns a pistol with 2 bullets remaining, which he'll use for murder-suicide of him and his son if he feels that it is a better fate for them than life in the alternative. Food and fuel are for what everybody is looking. The man has taught his son to be suspect of everyone that they meet. Really, probably the best movie I've ever seen as far as imagining yourself in just really dire circumstances. There's one scene where they come across a food cache. There's like canned foods and stuff like this. They haven't had a real meal in who knows how long, years. The boy opens up a can of peaches. They start eating peaches. And I mean, you can almost just sense how amazing a simple peach would be if you've gone years just living off scraps, not tasting anything sweet. And the man finds a bottle of whiskey, pours himself a glass of whiskey, and I was thinking, I especially can't help but think, my goodness, can you imagine that? Years go by. You've had no pleasure, guilty pleasures like that, and you come across a cachet of stuff like that, and you get to just sit there one night, warm, bathed, and enjoy a glass of whiskey. How that would be. The cause of the global catastrophe is never specified, so they kept the focus on how man and boy would try to survive in those settings. Extreme mountain, extreme cold survival. Of course, not all mountains are equal. The mountains that I do all my traveling through are forested. And so when I think of extreme mountains or extreme cold survival, I'm thinking about like Everest, these people who just want to get to the peak of things. They're not up there to live or to dilly-dally. They just want to get to the top and get down. John Carpenter's The Thing starred Kurt Russell in 1982. The plot, a U.S. research station, Antarctica, early winter 1982. The base is suddenly buzzed by a helicopter from the nearby Norwegian research station. They're trying to kill a dog that has escaped from their base. After the destruction of the Norwegian chopper, the members of the U.S. team fly to the Norwegian base, only to discover them all dead or missing. They do find the remains of a strange creature the Norwegians burned. The Americans take it to their base and deduce that it is an alien life form. After a while, it's apparent that the alien can take over and assimilate into other life forms, including humans, and can spread like a virus. This means that anyone at the base could be inhabited by the Thing, and tensions escalate. You bet your britches they do. This movie has become a tradition in British Antarctic research stations to watch. The Thing in 1982 is part of their midwinter feast and celebration held every June 21st. The original movie took place in the Arctic, that is to say the North Pole. This version takes place in Antarctica, the South Pole. Seeing them trying to deal with this thing in the midst of Antarctica is just fantastic, because they've got two things trying to kill them, right? They got to deal with the cold, and they got to deal with the realities of the alien. Number 3 on my list is Alive from 1993, starring Ethan Hawke. In 1972, a rugby team from South America goes to Chile to play a game. This is based on a true story. As they approach, they crash in the Andes Mountains and struggle to survive. They have to go through eating their loved ones, avalanches, finding the tail to the plane to get the transmitter since the batteries are in the tail. And so the whole movie is whether or not they'll make it out alive. Number 2, Everest. Really left an impression on me, this movie. Starring Josh Brolin, Sam Worthington, Jason Clarke, Jake Gyllenhaal. It's from 2015. Not too many movies have captured, I think, just the scope and the majesty of those mountains and the conditions up there. It's brutal, the movie. You just can't look away because it's just so magnificent, those mountains and those surroundings. And number 1 on my list of extreme mountain, extreme cold survival is The Mountain from 1956, starring Spencer Tracy. When a plane crashes on a mountaintop, Chris wants to plunder the wreckage. His older brother, Zachary, who is Spencer Tracy, has given up mountain guide work, but goes along rather than letting his brother risk it alone. The only survivor is a Hindu girl who Chris wants to kill. Zachary fights him off. While Chris steals from the dead passengers, Zachary prepares a sled to take the girl down the mountain. Spencer Tracy was sober when he consented to do this film, but on the way up to the resort where they were going to film this movie, their cable car malfunctioned and they were stuck in a life-threatening situation for some time. That evening, I reckon because of the stress of the situation, Spencer Tracy started drinking again. He drunk real heavy and lost his temper, threw a glass at the bartender, and even though the glass didn't hit the bartender, it did shatter and it cut pieces of Wagner's hand, and that can be seen in the movie. It's not necessarily that there's so many survival things that you learn from watching the movie, but it is one of the original movies that dealt with that subject matter, and I really enjoy it. It really gets your imagination going. My favorite category, wilderness survival. Ready for my list? Number 12, Never Cry Wolf from 1983. People love this movie. I don't love it, but it's a wilderness survival movie, so I've got it here on my list. It's a Disney movie, so I thought it was pretty tame, even though one of the main characters runs around naked and trying to kill some, I can't remember what it was, elk or something like that. I didn't find too much realism in the movie, to be honest with you. He eats some rats, which that's, that would have to be something you'd be willing to do. They were abundant. Number 11 is The Revenant. It was Leo DiCaprio won an Oscar for it. Number 10 is The Grey from 2012, starring Liam Neeson. Number 9, a movie I think probably a lot of people overlook, is Seraphim Falls from 2007. That stars Liam Neeson and also Pierce Brosnan and Liam Neeson. I was shocked when I didn't know anything about the movie when I started watching it. And it's so good. The first half hour or so is especially good. He's running through the mountains. There's snow, there's rivers, there's all kinds of things. He's being chased by men. It's just a fantastic movie. Number 8 on my list is Apocalypto from 2006, directed by Mel Gibson. Plot is the Yucatan, Mexico, year 1511. Vicious, bloodthirsty invaders attack the unsuspecting villagers of a tight-knit community nestled in the unforgiving jungle, capturing everyone. Now the fates of Jaguar Paul, a brave young hunter and father of one, and his fellow tribesmen who are facing certain death are hanging by a thread. However, a sincere but unfulfilled promise stemming from unconditional fatherly love is the only thing that keeps Jaguar Paul alive. Number 7 on my list is Into the Wild from 2007. This is the story of Christopher McCandless. He's the guy who went to Alaska and starved to death inside an abandoned bus. The actual guy in the movie who gives the actor playing McCandless rubber boots in real life was the guy who in real life gave McCandless rubber boots. A lot of insights, mostly what not to do. He takes a book into the wilderness with him, and he's determined that he can just live off wild edibles and stuff like that. And apparently one of the things that killed him was misidentification of some of those plants and roots and stuff like that. So the guy was a romantic. He wasn't realistic about the true nature of what it would be like to be out there. Anyway, beautiful look at Alaska and what not to do. Number 6 on my list from 2018 is the movie Arctic, starring Mads Mikkelsen. After a plane crash, a man fights to survive stranded alone in the Arctic. When he sees a helicopter, he sees the chance to be saved, but the helicopter also crashes, and he rescues a wounded woman from the debris. After a long period, he decides to embark on a journey with his patient for the nearest likely source of help. Mads Mikkelsen turns in and out. Fantastic performance in this movie, and I mean, you really get the sense of the cold and the limited resources and everything. Number 5, The Edge, 1997, Anthony Hopkins, Alec Baldwin. A billionaire goes to Alaska with his supermodel wife for a photo shoot. The men set out to look for a good location, take photos and everything, but they end up crashing in the woods. So it turns into a game of life and death when a man-eaten bear hunts after them, and the bear is not the only problem. One thing I learned from the movie, this come out in 97. I was a lot younger. Anthony Hopkins makes a compass using a needle and just magnetizing it by rubbing it on his clothes, and puts it on a leaf in a little pool of water, and he gets direction. And finds out that the needle was being affected by the metal of his belt buckle. I think that's what it was. And, that really stood out to me. So there were little insights like that I gained from watching that movie that have stuck with me for all these years. Number 4, Iceman, 2017. Movie takes place 5,300 years ago. It's a fictional story based on a real-life mummy that they discovered up in those mountains called Otzi the Iceman. A Neolithic clan is settled near a creek. While Caleb is hunting, the settlement is attacked, the members of the tribe brutally murdered, among them Caleb's wife and son. Only one newborn survives and the shrine is gone. Blinded by pain and fury, Caleb is out for vengeance and pursues the murderers. He fights for the infant's survival and against the forces of nature. Blood from 4 different people was actually found on the real-life Otzi's belongings, which support the idea that he led at least sometimes a violent life. Number 3 on my list of wilderness survival, How the West Was Won, 1962, starring James Stewart, John Wayne, Gregory Peck, Henry Fonda, big, huge, all-star cast. It's a sprawling epic which follows the Prescotts, an immigrant family through 4 generations from the Erie Canal in the 1830s to their settled home in the West a half a century later. You can imagine all the those that they encounter along the way, which I just find fascinating. I love settler history, frontiersman history. Those people had no one doing things for them first. They had to do it first. There was no map for where they were going. They had to figure it out and create the maps and do all that. Forests, there's cliffs, there's caves, there's everything in this movie, and it's just a beautiful movie. It was shot with Cinerama, which used 3 different lenses, and then it was seamed together at the theater. Number 2 on my list, Jeremiah Johnson, 1972, starring Robert Redford. During the mid-19th century, Jeremiah Johnson, after he gets out of the army, decides he'd prefer a life of solitude and peace by living with nature in the mountains of the frontier of the American West. The plan entails finding a piece of land upon which to build a house. And the results of all this end up not being quite what he envisioned. He ends up needing the help of other people to learn the ways of the mountains and of the wilderness and everything. It's based on a real-life trapper named John Johnston, nicknamed Crow Killer, and also nicknamed Liver Eater Johnston. He'd cut out and eat the livers of Crow Indians he'd killed. Several Crows had murdered his wife, and he swore vengeance against the entire tribe. Many of the locations for the film were shot on or near Robert Redford's property in Utah at the time. Robert Redford describes this as his favorite movie of all of his movies. He likes that Johnston suffers but continues on. There's a lot of things to learn in this movie. Ways of staying warm at night, hunting, dealing with wildlife. You get a real sense of what mountain life was like. It's a beautifully made movie. Number 1 on my favorite wilderness survival movies, The Mountain Men from 1980, starring Charlton Heston. two grizzled mountain men during the dying days of the fur trapping era. Plot begins when Running Moon runs away from her abusive husband, Heavy Eagle, and comes across the two seedy fur trappers. The mountain men take her in, unaware that Heavy Eagle has dispatched an army of Indian braves to reclaim her. Though it's never explicitly stated in the film, the story takes place during 1838. Charlton Heston was displeased with the final result because it didn't do well commercially. But I tell you, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. These are hardened, vulgar men, and I grew up around a lot of hardened, vulgar men. So I can see the realism of that. It's got a lot of the same qualities that make Jeremiah Johnson from 1972 so good are shared in this movie, The Mountain Men. And it's just lesser known and lesser appreciated. It makes me feel like I'm outdoors and gives me a sense of being outdoors and in the snow and all sorts of conditions and the way that life was in that era. The character, Bill Tyler, is based on John Coulter, a hunter and scout on Lewis and Clark expeditions, who chose to remain in the wilderness when the expedition returned east. He was a hunter and a trapper in the early 1800s. He became the first white man to explore and report in detail the region that would become Wyoming, including the areas that become Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks. The Mountain Men from 1980, starring Charlton Heston.